There it is.
Great to go.
So welcome everyone. It's nice to see a couple of friendly faces. It's lovely that some people keep in, their cameras on. That's no shade on everybody else. Whatever you feel comfortable with, but it's nice seeing you guys. Thank you for the introduction, Emma. I'm an integrative counsellor. I have a private practice in South London. Work for, and this is new, and Emma might have not known this, also for Women's Aid Solace, that's North London Rape Crisis. And I no longer work at the hospice, however. Obviously, I still work a lot with bereavement because, to be honest, it's some part in our life, it's going to affect everybody. It's going to come into the counselling room, and I do a lot of bereavement work to this day. And it might sound a bit strange, but it's one of my most favorite things to do because there is so much value there, and there's also a lot of things you can do, and that's why we're talking about good grief today. So guys, what do you think? I know we have like hands up, we can do hands up or even unmute yourself a moment. Do you think there is such a thing as good grief?
I don't know.
Okay. We'll see. We'll see what you think at the end.
Well, if the Zoom session is called Good Grief, then there's going to be an answer to that, and you're probably going to tell us, yes, there is.
I don't think so. Okay, Jack says I don't think so. Okay. All right, it's a bit of a mixed bag. We have some skeptics here. But you are right. You're absolutely right, Nicolette. There is something is good grief. It's a big fat yes from me, from my side. And it's not in the sense of, grief as in good, but in as I have to remove my kidney in order to go on to live. That's what good grief basically is. Because if you look at it this way, right? Our brain is a computer. And grief or the loss of a loved one or the loss of a person, right, is a traumatic event. And as in that computer, which is our brain really, there's a lot of emotions needing to be processed. Because if we don't process it, right, you open the computer, these emotions stay online. They go nowhere. However, if you process it, and that's what I mean with in good grief, your brain has the ability to actually file it away. It has to do with memory, right? You're doing your memory thing. So you can put it in a folder and it sits there neat. So every time you open a computer, it doesn't hit you in the face straight away. So processed grief is good grief. Sort of that's what the basis we're jumping off from today, right? I do understand, you're skeptic because quite frankly, grief is probably one of the most horrible experiences in your life that you will ever have, right? I think we probably can all agree on that. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to run you through a few things. We're going, as Emma said, we're going to actually start looking at other cultures and how other cultures grieve, because sometimes I think in England, we could do a bit better. And then I also will, run you through grief tasks, because there's such a thing as grief tasks, and maybe something you find helpful. If anybody here, for example, suffers from insomnia, panic attack, anxiety, because they can go very, very closely related, they can go hand in hand. And that, again, has also to do with when you're either in the process of processing grief or you're not processing grief. Because what we really, really want to avoid is, and I see it happen, not even that rare, that people 10 years down the line come into my room and they're depressed. And it has a lot to do because, when you talk about, sometimes I talk about that room where, somebody died, they haven't left that room, right? So processing is important, and let's see how we're going to do this. So can you guys tell me if you think that grief in England, and maybe, we have different cultures here, that somebody maybe say, okay, I have good experience with, where I come from and we grieve differently and that's good, or in England, are we grieving all right? Because from where I'm sitting, the way I see it, yes, we do the whole, we're going to have a funeral, which is great because it's important to sort of have very visual images of, you know, somebody being laid to rest. It helps the process. Then we have a wake, you know, where you can celebrate life, you can cry, but there already goes it is a little bit of a British stiff upper lip coming in, right? Sort of, we don't do excessive, you know, show or display of feelings, right? We can cry a little bit, but please don't do it too much. And then, you know, you might have a little bit of compassionate leave, you know, from work, give you 2 weeks, and then you can come back and, you know, you hide your crying jacks in a toilet, and people wonder what's wrong with you. You should be over it by now. You know, there seems to be not enough space for grief. It's extremely isolating. It feels like the world's still turning. You just went off and you're watching everybody just going about their business, and you're no longer part of it. So what do other countries do? So, and please do feel free, you know, if you do want to share, or even if, obviously, even if you're English and you have a nice ritual, you know, that you sort of thought was quite helpful and was quite nice, feel free to share. But let me start you off. There is, so that is very expressive, as I said, you know, I called it the, you know, British stiff upper lip. But, you know, when you look at sort of Egyptian, Chinese, Mediterranean and Near Eastern cultures, they hire professional mourners. And that's usually women, and some of you might have heard of it. And what they do, they go to the grave sites during the funeral, they scream, they cry in pain, they wail. And it's really about expressing emotions, you know, in a very healthy way, almost, you know, because, as I said, suppressed emotions, they're not going anywhere. They're staying, right? They just, you know, as I said, you can put them in a different folder, not on your desktop, but they're still there. Or in Judaism, mourners, for example, sometimes strip patches of clothing, you know, off themselves for an outlet of their grief. And in Egypt, it is, if you're actually not overcome, you know, with despair and grief, people would wonder a little bit, you know. And even in South America and Africa, it can get really violent almost in their reactions, in their despair. And it's normal, it's accepted. And then what also sometimes happens in Britain, and that's what I see with my clients, is that nobody wants to talk about it. So you had this very, very, sometimes, not always, but quite often, you have this very terrible. Oh, sorry, Robert. Oh.
Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to, you know, say that despite the, you know, cultural, like, you know, differences, there's also the pandemic. So a lot of people didn't get a funeral or anything.
Oh,
I didn't
yeah.
get anything.
Yeah. No, completely. And thanks for, you know, for saying that, because this is absolutely true, because this is what we are now also working with, isn't it? We've seen that there's a complete and utter absence of grief expression. And I'm coming to the whole communitarian grief expression as well. And that's also, and that adds another layer, isn't it? There is something not complete, right? Would you say that, Robert? It feels like there's something completely that is not complete.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, from the very start, you know, under normal circumstances, there would have been hugs or something.
Mhm.
People didn't want to hug me. They wanted to stand a meter away or something. I couldn't go to a funeral. Everything was via Zoom.
Mhm.
And we had also moved, I'm in Barcelona, and we had just moved here. And so, like, family and like friends are, you know, an ocean away. And so that added, I mean, there's like so many, like, you know, levels.
Yeah.
And it all, like, you know, can add up to not having, to having an incomplete experience. And it makes it, I think, I'm sure in like a lot of people's cases, it's made it like drag on in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, because there's an actually very crucial part missing. And that's the part of where you have the ability to see somebody off, isn't it? To sort of pay your respects. That ritual is extremely important. And were you able, I know you said you're still missing it, but were you able to find a way for yourself or your family in Barcelona?
No, well, I mean, I'm from America too. We were both from California. And the only thing that we were able to do was like some kind of Zoom thing that a friend of hers had organized. But I think in like, in my case, it probably did more harm than it did good, because it was an internet, like a social media organized thing. And I guess it was open invitation. I don't do a lot of social media, so I don't know, but I was told that it was open. And so there was a few people that didn't understand, my grief. And the whole point of like that is for emotional support. I was even made fun of because I was crying the whole time. And that was maybe like, 4 months after, because it was around her, like, birthday. And March, her, like, birthday, and October, just this last month, it's a year now. And those like 2 months, I have a feeling, are going to always be like my, hell months. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. It sounds painful, but I do hope that, a couple of things we're going to go through might help you. Nicolette.
Yeah, just to sort of piggyback on what Robert said. So I have pretty severe ME/CFS, myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome. And even if there wasn't a pandemic, I still would not have been able to get on a plane or drive across the country to say goodbye to my mother in person because of the illness. So I would say having your own medical problems can interfere with the process, and it is still interfering. So I'm in New York State and my family's in Colorado, and nothing was planned for my mother at all. And I knew that ahead of time, but now that she's passed, now I'm a little bit like, WTF. I do want to do something. So I actually wrote the obituary for our local paper. And now the next thing that I'm going to want to explore is how to have some kind of celebration of life virtually, and that's fine because of the geographic distances. So I'm just sort of, even if there wasn't a pandemic, there are people who cannot travel.
Yeah.
And when my mom died, I was just racked and sobbing all alone, and it, not to have anybody. So there are things that interfere, and illness is one of them.
No, absolutely. And thank you, Nicolette. And that again, right, 100%, there is a myriad of reasons why people cannot, one of them being illnesses or the pandemic, two of them. But, just sort of kind of to move along a little bit at this point, just to see, continuing on what other people do when you can attend the funeral, but also when you can't, because there's things you also can do. Right. And that has to do then with actual mourning. And I was just about to, kind of tell you a little bit about what you do in a Muslim culture after the funeral, that actually it is not uncommon for families to go to the mourner's family and actually ask about what the death was like. So while, for some people it might be quite overwhelming and they're not ready to talk about it, but for other people it can be hugely therapeutic, because very often, people they're like, when you talk about pain and we talk about the bad things that have happened, people, they cringe, they want to get away, they don't want to see it, they don't want to, sort of a little bit like a toddler going, no, if I can't see it, it's not happening. So that is also a good way, giving people the space, talking about what actually happens, and that includes the painful bits when at the time of death. And then, when you can't attend, you still have a grieving period, regardless. And then it's sort of, and it also happened like in England, and I'm sure in America as well, widows, very famously wore black for a time period, and sort of the Orthodox Christians do it for 40 days. In Islamic countries you practice 40-day mourning period, and it's only dwarfs at Jewish funerals. When a parent actually passes away, they get to mourn. That sounds so strange, but in a way it is a little bit like that, isn't it? They mourn for an entire year. And I said, it was a bit of a Freudian slip there, get to mourn, but because we don't have a lot of space to mourn, because of sort of expectations from other people, expectations from work, and sometimes society as well. It's like, is she not over it yet? Can he not move on? Come on, it's been a year. But this is not how grief works, and I'm sure you guys know this. There is no time limit. Sort of when you grieve, you have to know that this is going to be for the long haul. This might even be forever, but the difference is the grief will not floor you anymore. And that's where we want to get to. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'm rewinding. And here is what you probably will find quite difficult, Robert and Nicolette, is the communitarian mourning, which is so important because grief is very isolating. And who does it very well? You probably know it. It's the Mexicans, because they got Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, where the souls are invited, to have dinner and drinks with the family and music. And it's entire, it's not just like one family. It's like the whole village, the whole city, and you honor and help people, to deal with it. And then what have we got? In Judaism, you have Yom Kippur, right, where you remember those ones that you loved and lost. And yeah, we have that in England and in other European countries too. We have All Saints Day, Hallow Mass, but it feels a little bit like you do that almost unless you're, going to church, go in a mass and do that. But if you're not really religious, you're still a little bit on your own. You sort of take yourself maybe to the cemetery and lay down some flowers, but it's a very private affair. And then also in generally in England, and maybe some, I'm sure other countries as well, but we're talking about England. We don't really let children see dead bodies. It used to be very, very common to display dead bodies because mortality and death was part of life. And in some obviously cultures, it still very much is. My dad, for example, he's grown up in the Czech Republic. And I think by the age of 5, his grandmother had dragged him to like 30 funerals, with bodies displayed. So there is an expectation, it's part of life. But I think as a country, in England, and I think America as well, we're not very good with death in general. So this was just a little bit of an idea. And when you look at a little roundup, and when you look at other countries, what we can learn from them is take your time when you're grieving. Really make sure that you're on your own timeline. Because while there's something like good grief, there are no rules to grieving. Everybody needs to do it as best as they can in their own time. Express your pain, right? You might not be wailing at the graveside, but wail in your living room. Express it. Don't keep it in. Seek community. If there's nobody immediately around you, you've got some, places like Untangled. Seek other people or try to connect. I know sometimes with families, it can be also quite tricky, but, try not to be alone. And then if you can, remember together, right? Have a place, have a ritual, remember together. There's a lot of value in that as well. Okay, do we have any questions at the moment, or anybody wants to add something to it? If we're good, I'm going to move us over to the grief work, because this is work and we all got a task at hand. So the first task, I'm not sure in what stage you are, but yeah, we all have a task, a job to do when we're grieving. And it's a really shitty job. Nobody really wants to do it. It doesn't pay very well either. But we have to do it. And the good thing about it is it gives us a little bit of control. We are in a way not a victim of our grief, right? So the first one, and everybody knows that one, you gotta feel your feelings. You gotta feel the pain. You gotta feel the depression. There is no There is just no way around it, because as I said, if you don't, it will come back. It doesn't go away. It will come back. So this is a very, very normal part of the process. Your first task is feel the pain, almost be intentional about the pain, allow it, right? Don't, you know, I wouldn't go as far as to say like, welcome it. No, it's awful, right? But this is first step. The second step, your second task is rearrange your life in a very practical way and a little bit in an emotional way as well, without the person you've lost in it. Because now you have that human shaped size hole in your life, right? And some of you might have lived with a person or had extremely close contact, you know, lived in the same country. Some of you haven't, but there's still always elements where you expect the person to be. It could be in bed next to you. It could be the person coming around the corner, right? You expect it. So you have to sort of feel your way. And I'm not saying it's a quick process, it's a quick task. You take it off, you know, of your to-do list. No, not at all. It's a slow process. You're getting used to the person not being around. Your brain has to catch up, right? And then the third task, and that's a biggie. And that's also my favorite bit, is you find a place for that person where you can carry them and you can carry them safely. Their memory no longer floors you. It doesn't knock you for six thinking about them. Actually, their memory now is more positive than painful, because before they died, they had a whole life before them. They're not their death, are they? They're their life. And if you find a place, you know, I always go like that, because for me, sort of, you know, in my heart, you can put them wherever you like. So you can have that continuing bond. They can sit with you. But you can leave that room where unspeakable things happen. You can, for, you know, sort of that phone call you got, that moment, you know, it's no longer the defining moment, because now they're here and you carry them and it's okay. And that's your 3 tasks. How are we feeling about this? No? Don't worry, you don't have to say anything. Robert.
Yeah, sorry. The grief. It's giving me like ADHD. What was the second one again? I'm sorry.
The second task is getting actually used to the person missing in your life. You know, when you're so used to meeting them or picking up the phone to them, sort of you kind of, you know, get to a point where you say, okay, it's not going to happen. It's the understanding that your brain almost can catch up.
Okay.
No worries. We got Barry's got his hand raised. Barry, hi.
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, I guess for me, I'm interested in how you understand, if you were talking about letting the emotions out, and I have that sense that I do. So my partner passed away a couple of months ago after ovarian cancer. So in some ways, I was, I guess, fortunate because I was there and we knew that, you know, what was happening. We were able to make the most of the time we had together. But and when she passed away, there was I cried quite a lot and had that. But I guess it's, how do you know that you've let all of the feelings come out? That's my concern, is that I don't know that what I don't know, I guess.
First of all, very sorry for your loss, Barry. It's awful, horrible disease.
Yeah.
But it's a good question, right? Because we're talking, you're getting through the task. It's not as easy, right? There's always the question: am I doing enough? Am I doing it right? How are you feeling at the moment about it?
Well, a bit like what you said there a minute ago. I look at the time we had together. So we were together for about 3 years. So I divorced and she was separated and we met. and we were together for about 3 years, and quite a long time. Part of that was, she found out she had ovarian cancer. But I look back on it as being absolute privilege to have had her in my life, and it was. She wasn't. It was, our time wasn't defined by the cancer. It wasn't defined by the death. The time we had together was defined by lots of positivity and lots of really good times. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't hard. There was a lot of very hard times when she was having chemo and various treatments. But I guess I choose to focus on the positive that I took from that relationship. And she, did a lot for me, helped me through some very difficult times. So I feel
quite privileged.
okay. And I guess I worry that I feel not bad enough almost sometimes.
Oh no, goodness. No, what you actually described sounds absolutely wonderful. And it sounds like, because there is that period where you had an awareness, right? You had a bit of time. I'm not saying that it always helps, but it can really help. And also maybe your understanding about death and mortality is, dare I say, more positive, or I'm not, is that something you openly talk about, or, that you were able to...
We knew it was coming. We knew that there was a chance that, if she got to 5 years, we'd have been really lucky. And we, from diagnosis to death was, 18 months. And unlike Robert, we were very lucky. We were able to have a big celebration, and the celebration was in a beautiful country house. It wasn't like an austere crematorium. It's this lovely country house, and we've laid her to rest in this beautiful kind of natural burial ground. So everything that I've had was, it feels as good as a send-off as we could have possibly given to her. But I still worry that I haven't grieved enough, and that there's stuff that hasn't filtered out, that I haven't acknowledged, that I don't know about, I guess.
Well, to be fair, obviously, we just met, but it doesn't really sound at this point in time like you are greatly in denial, or you're suppressing a lot of your emotions. It seems like you're very conscious. There was a lot of intention in your relationship. You moved along it very, very mindful to not let it define you, and to have a really good time together. So so I would say, don't worry that you do not grieve enough. And because if anything happens, if you can express your feelings, you'll get a sense. But that's also the thing. Do we grieve enough? What is too much? It's sort of...
Well, as you said, the British way is we sort of time box it into, you have the funeral, you have the service, and then that's it, you're done. And it doesn't work like that, because as you said, they're there in your heart every day, and every day is a new day. It's the first day without that person, and that's not just for a few months or a year. It'll be forever. It'll be always the first day without that person. But I don't think the pain gets any easier, but I think that I will start to cope with the pain better. As you said, it doesn't floor you so much. It's still there, but you're coping with it better, as I think what's happening.
This is it, because again, everybody's different, right? And some people might actually get themselves to points, also depending on the relationship and who they are, really, where there is very minimal pain or no pain, and just memories, or but then very often, more often than not, there is still pain. But the pain is not like the first 2 weeks after. The pain is not like the first year after. Right? So it's about managing. And from where I'm sitting, Barry, you seem to be doing quite a good job. By honoring that.
I hope so. By being here, I guess being here is a good step. So
100%. Thank you. And also, I saw Barbara. I just want to acknowledge what you wrote in the chat. And this is again it, right? It's been a year, you said. It's coming up to a year, and you still can't get your head around. that's also, you know, not that unusual. You sort of, you know, that's sort of grief task number 2. You're still adjusting. So yeah, thank you for all, you know, your input. And if we're all okay for now, I wanted to ask what would be most beneficial, you know, sort of for the majority of people, because there's something a bit more practical I would like to do with you. And one of the things, I don't know if you're interested in sort of how to manage panic attacks, because very often, you know, death comes sort of with anxiety, and it's a massive stressor, and anxiety and stresses that panic attacks can happen. Then we have a bit of, you know, sort of insomnia, and then there's a little sort of anxiety thing I could walk you through. Heidi, talk to me.
Hi,
Hi.
it's been like, hi, it's been 6 months since I lost my mum. And you mentioned about insomnia. I'm having trouble sleeping. My mum's death was very traumatic, and I witnessed her die, and I'm dealing with pain, obviously. But I tried to reach out to a close friend recently, and I told her, you know, that I was struggling with not sleeping at night because I keep getting nightmares about the way my mum died. And she's basically I feel like she's kind of blocked me out of her life, because she can't obviously deal with my pain, you know. And I did kind of tell her exactly how my mum died, and it is horrific, and you know, I think it's still really playing on my mind. I keep getting really bad nightmares, and visions of, you know, what happened, and you know, it makes me tired for work, and I think that has a big impact on my everyday mood, you know, constantly feeling tired all the time.
Yeah.
So you mentioned just now about insomnia and panic attacks. I don't seem to be suffering with panic attacks. It's just the nightmares and the insomnia. Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, given what you just described, I'm not entirely sure how helpful it actually will be what I sort of can share, how you can sort of, you know, improve your sleep. Because here we're dealing with nightmares, and nightmares can be part of sort of an almost direct reaction to grief, right? Because what dreams really are the acting out of emotions that we haven't expressed during the day, right? And when we grieve, and very often we don't really express that grief all the time, you know, in the supermarket at work, we might do, but very often we kind of hold it in. So it's coming out at night. And these feelings, they're unreleased, and they get trapped in our nervous system. And, you know, sort of, and when we are in that space, we overstress the dream mechanism, you know, by too much worrying, and grief is very, you know, it's very overwhelming. We actually end up dreaming more than it's good for us, and we wake up exhausted, you know. And you know, we need to be very mindful, because that can actually lead to depression. So while I could actually walk you through a sort of very nice way of helping your insomnia, if you're dealing with very extreme, maybe graphic nightmares, I probably would advise you to, I don't know if you already are, but speak to someone.
Okay.
Look for a little bit of support. You know, if you feel like it's not getting better and you're so exhausted, because that's one thing I wanted to say. Grief can be so violent, right, on the body. And sometimes when we can't do nothing, we have to scale it back to basics. And it might sound silly, but there's such a mind and body connection, right? It's all connected. That's why we get heart palpitation. That's why we get IBS. That's why, you know, we feel our heart break. That's why we shake, because it's all, you know, emotions. You need to bring it back to basics. And it's, as I said, it sounds silly, but there is a good reason to it. Your diet, you need to make sure you nourish your body. You need to stay hydrated. If you can, exercise. and you need to get sleep. And this is where the problem is at the moment for you. You're also not sleeping. It has a knock-on effect.
Yeah.
And sort of maybe work through these feelings, because dreams are the unexpressed emotions.
Thank you.
Right? Do you find that helpful?
Yes, thank you. I will
Right.
talk to someone.
All right. And then I had a question about what's the difference between depression and grief? That's a really good question, by the way, because they can look extremely similar. It's very, very hard to know, because especially in the beginning, it feels the same. You can't get out of bed. You're completely unmotivated. You know, things you used to love have completely lost the color, right? So they're very, very similar. The big difference is that depression usually would last longer. It just doesn't go away. You don't just sort of have a good day, right? You just have rubbish days. And so there's no let off. Depression is relentless, and grief has its little pockets where you maybe find a humor, or you might feel a little bit different, and you can connect with people. And also, you shouldn't have really suicidal thoughts, right? And you should kind of worry where you're at. You know, there is obviously the element, it's like, is my life still worth living without that person, right? But you shouldn't go as far as to make plans. So, you know, sort of wishing that you were gone, because then the pain would gone, right? I wouldn't at that point be very worried. But if that goes further in terms of plans, then we're going into dangerous territory, and you should really, you know, ask for help or talk to somebody, talk to your GP, talk to a counselor. But yeah, if you're having difficulties sort of to make a differentiation between them, might also be worth to actually chat to somebody just to feel it out. You know, I feel too depressed, because even if you're not clinically depressed, you know, you still can ask for support. And I think you should. You definitely should, you know, break through that isolation. So what I want to do, and Heidi, I think you probably will find that maybe quite helpful. What I would like to do is, you're very welcome. Is what I'd like to do is teach you something today. And I hope that, you know, maybe some of you already know it. Maybe some don't. But if somebody actually does suffer from panic attacks, it's one of the techniques that is incredibly valuable, because you cannot have a panic attack when you're relaxed. You cannot feel anxious when you're relaxed. And, you know, maybe some of you might already see it coming, but it's a breathing technique. And, you know, for the skeptics among us, it's not just breathing, you know, it's not just a little bit, I'm just here breathing. It actually is designed to calm the nervous system. So there's a method to madness. Because sometimes, you know, especially when you're having a panic attack, you can actually try it. Chest breathing, this very shallow chest breathing for 1.5 minutes will give anybody a panic attack, because you don't have enough carbon dioxide in your breath anymore, and you need it to transport oxygen in your blood cells. So you will get pain because the tissue is not getting enough oxygen. You will not die. You still get enough oxygen, but it feels like that. So you kind of need to calm yourself down. But even when you're grieving, right? When you're overcome by pain, the overwhelmed feeling, you know, at this point, your brain is in a state of high arousal. What you need to do is find a window of tolerance. And that's when I like to use the 7-11 breathing method, right? It doesn't need to be 7-11, it's just catchy. It could be a 5 to 8. The most important thing is that the out breath is always longer than the in breath. So is everybody up for trying it out with me here together? I hope for enthusiastic consent. Thank you, Barry. So yeah, feel free to join in or not, try it out. Thanks, Claire. Let's go for it. So what you do, if you want, if you find it easier, right, you can turn your video off, you can close your eyes. the idea is extremely deep breathing. So it has to go through the diaphragm. So put your hands on your bellies, because what needs to happen is the belly needs to go up. We need to get it big. Shoulders are not moving too much. Sorry, Sally, I will get to you in a bit. Let's we're doing a 7-11 first. So sit comfortable, drop your shoulders, unclench your jaws. And it goes everything in through the nose, out through the nose, hands on your belly. And I'm going to start, I'm going to do the counting for you and just going to say in and out. And if you can't, do it so long, like 11 is quite long, just stop and then breathe in when I say in again. All right, let's go. And in. Oh, no, sorry. This is my bad. Before, can I get a little feel of the room? If you had to score your anxiety at the moment from 1, you're half asleep, to 10, very high, can you drop in the chat where your anxiety is at the moment, how you're feeling? Okay, we got a 6, a 0. Ah, somebody's very chilled. Okay. So we get some really chill people here and a bit more anxiety. Okay. Mixed bag. Let's try it when we're ready. And hands on your bellies and in. And out. 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 And the last 2, in. And out. And in. And out. All right. When you're ready, come back to me. I saw Nicolette, she's very chilled. Bit tired. Fair enough.
The yawning indicates that my nervous system is realigning. So yawning is also another good nervous system. Like it happens sometimes when I meditate.
It cools you down, yeah, it cools your brain down.
Well, the yawning indicates that the nervous system is engaged in realigning. So,
So can I get a little gauge of the room again? How you feeling now? Especially the 6s and the 7s. But anyone, obviously. How are we doing now? So Heidi, that's good. Happy to see that. A bit more relaxed. Thank you, Nicolette, nap time. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, guys. So it looks like it's gone down a little bit. Sandra's chilled. Thank you. Thank you for doing that with me. And this is an exercise you can really do anywhere. You can obviously do it for longer than, like we've done like a minute and a half, because I do appreciate we're on Zoom, right? And we don't know each other. It might be a bit weird. But so yeah, that's why I thank you for doing it with me, and do use it. I really, recommend to some people do it just regular, they start their day, they end their day. It helps when you can't sleep, when you're suffering from insomnia, that helps as well. So try it out, give it a good old go. So I'm conscious of the time, right? We have about 5 minutes. And I wanted to give the floor over to you guys if you had any questions. And hang on, there was somebody else dropped a message in the chat. It was you, Sally. Yeah. I've done, because obviously now in this time frame, we won't be able to really talk about that, Sally, but we've done, thanks, Barbara. I've done a complicated emotions after loss. It's on the website. Maybe you want to have a look at that, look sort of anger, because anger is quite a common emotion after loss, especially, family relations and, so maybe you want to look at that. Yeah. Okay. Anyone? Any questions? The floor is yours.
Well, I just want to say that I noticed that with grief and upset about anything, it's sort of like a snowball effect for me. If I'm feeling grief, like around the loss of my mother, it will bring up other grief, and it just has that effect. That's all I wanted to say.
Yep. Correct. It is. I mean, it can, it can trigger even previous loss experiences, that are 20 years ago, but, that there can still be a little bit of unprocessed feelings as well. Yes, Robert?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. I'm gonna have to try this when, I get kind of PTSD from when my partner passed. And I also wanted to thank, I think it was Gary, right, that spoke, because he kind of reminded me that, PTSD comes from, in our case, her passing was unexpected. And so I keep replaying over and over things I could have done, the things I should have done to I just feel like the last moments were not my best moments. And there's shame and guilt associated with all of that. And that thing causes the PTSD. So I hope maybe this breathing exercise will help for that. Do you think? And then also I want to thank, I wanted to thank him for sharing that, because it really reminded me that we were not prepared for what was going to happen.
Yeah. Robert, have you had help or support for your PTSD? Have you been diagnosed?
I'm going to I'm sorry. I'm going to a therapist here, and she was recommending EMDR. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. But I've looked into it a little bit here, and it's really expensive here. There's not a lot of options. I have gone to some Spanish-speaking group meetings here and other things, and the problem I have is half the people want to speak in Catalan, which I don't. I can follow along sometimes, and then I feel like a jerk if I force everyone to speak a language they don't want to speak. And so I've been doing the online group, and then I'm going to a private therapist.
Yeah.
The EMDR, I don't know. I did do something that actually helped though, which was moving meditation with a silent chair. And the person I was meditating with asked me to share my trauma with her, and something really interesting came out of that, and it's that I didn't want to give it to her because it was mine.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped a lot.
There are different ways. So EMDR, you're absolutely right, extremely expensive treatment, right? But because PTSD is an extreme version of anxiety, like sort of the highest end of anxiety, there's other treatment options. But, you know, don't be alone with PTSD. That's all I wanted to say, right? Make sure you get well.
Alone with.
Don't be alone with PTSD. You know, don't deal with it alone.
Well, sometimes I don't have a choice. I've been doing well, but with her, like, 1 year anniversary, it has kind of started to creep up again. So maybe I need another one of those like silent meditation things because it really helps.
Robert, honestly, everything is fair. If it doesn't hurt you, you know, we're not talking about drugs and alcohol, but
yeah,
do your thing.
All right, thank you. No
worries. Anybody else? And also thank you guys for the lovely messages in the chat. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think if we don't have any more questions, then it's our time to bid farewell and maybe even to see you later. Have we lost Emma actually?